There's bees living in this roof up here. It's extremely annoying. And don't even write advice on how to get rid of them. I already know what I'm doing and what works and doesn't work. And I think at this point the smart thing to do is to not have anyone who's allergic to bees here, or at least not right there, because occasionally a bee will be upset and it will sting you. Well, as I walked to town today, the topic is land use, which I've talked about a lot before, but my views on it keep changing. And these videos actually help me kind of hear my thoughts out loud, and occasionally your feedback is useful. It is a lot better if you have your own videos and you're not an anonymous person. You could always introduce yourself on the forum I have available, so I know who I'm talking to, because I understand the need to protect privacy, but at the same time, it's a very unbalanced situation where you're telling me what I have to do and judging me and ordering me around, telling me I have to believe in your God, whatever weird-ass shit is your trip. Obviously, I don't enjoy that kind of thing. So, anyway, land use, it's really wonderful that I have had so many years to think about what to do and not having the resources to do it. The benefit of that is that I can't go fuck shit up really easily. You know, I don't have the ability to. And that forces me into this extremely patient process of making small changes, learning how the forest changes naturally and the cycles it goes through, and really question every decision I think I'm making. One of those is that I have taken the areas of the property and divided them into different parts. And I could just imagine that as a road or a fence between different communities. But I was thinking about how, let's say after I die, that's what I'm preparing for, is my death, that different parts of it were owned by a particular nonprofit or a trust. I don't know the exact legal structure, and it might not be the same one for every one of them. That, of course, has immense benefits, that different communities can have different focuses. They could support different age groups differently. Some of them could be more public-facing or not. Some of them could have particular businesses that they run that might host outsiders, while others are very closed off to outsiders. So there's big benefits to it being divided. But I was thinking about the areas between them. And even if you had a road between a community space, or if it was just a property line, I want those to be a big zone that's owned by the overarching organization that has representatives in it from every single one of these groups. And the reason this is a really amazing, interesting way of thinking of it is because no one I've heard of has ever done anything like that. And since these different communities, though they could share some base values and common structures, social structures and things, each one is really its own experiment. They could have different decision-making processes. I mean, hopefully anything we can agree on, all of them should all have, and we should have shared resources for them. We don't need every one of them to have a lawyer. We don't need every one of them to have a highly specialized tool. And so we can share a lot of stuff, making it much easier to create a community, because it is dang near impossible to create a community that works, that lives. The stories are endless about how they all suck. It's just as messed up as how couples are all messed up. I mean, the percentage of couples that are actually good is really low. And that's depressing to say, but really think about it. How many people you've been with in your life? How many relationships have worked out? And that shouldn't necessarily be the defining attribute of whether a relationship was good or not. Maybe it's okay if communities come together for a time and then separate. I mean, I imagine like nomadic communities that by definition are continually having people join and leave them. while others might be more stable. And that's the decision that that group makes. So there is an option for having a community that has a lot of turnover, and also it has a lot of outsiders visiting. Let's say your community primarily exists to host workshops. That's totally doable. I've got 13 acres I'm looking at right now that I would set aside as such a space. It has option for solar power, internet. It has, in the way I'm dividing it up now, it has one bigger building, one smaller building, another smaller building, a nice view, lots of different types of environments. It has not a lot of slope, which is actually kind of good for a workshop space, because a lot of people don't want to spend their whole workshop going up and down a hill. But the point is, each other part of this property could then, it could be run differently. For example, how the hell do I get this thing started? How do I get from where I'm at to where I want to be? And how can I work with others in a positive way? Well, one option would be to make an agreement with somebody and have lawyers involved to protect the forest from being stolen by assholes or destroyed. But make agreements with some people that they can use it for a certain amount of time. Now that does reduce their interest in investing in it, but there's several solutions here that are possible. But they could at least be with their friends in the forest, bringing their own infrastructure, or in other cases I could be helping out with that. The agreements could vary. And then if I widen between community spaces, if I widen the part that's owned by the overarching organization, that gives me a bunch of options that are really kind of cool. Because then a community can set up better barriers, walls that protect it, and also people who want services can get to the edges of that community and get those services, if the community has any services at all. And who has access to that space between two communities could also be very controlled. It might be that those two communities decide we let in only people from our two communities. That is like a co-owned space we own. And that should be okay with the overall larger organization. Maybe that's part of the original plan. Maybe that plan's getting made right now. Or it could be a space that has a road through it, and instead of just having the communities come right up to the road, we widen that space out so that we have options for more shared services, cool sculptures, places to get out of the rain and the sun, and how that shakes out, we don't know. But I think that's a great way to hedge our bet. And that's the way I think about planning. A lot of it is like risk assessment, avoiding risks, and then similarly looking for opportunities. So this bigger space between two communities would actually be super useful. And then figuring out like how to choose people who, like how long a time would I lease it to them for, rent it for, lend it to them. Ideally, it wouldn't even be a financial arrangement because that adds complexities and law shit that is inconvenient, taxes and shit like that. And that's not my primary goal. My primary goal is what's going to work. And ultimately, the ideal is that these people, it could be they're just there for a year, a season. It could be they're there for 5 years, but we want longer relationships because those are going to encourage people to be willing to invest in that land if they feel they're eventually going to be the controlling people behind the organization that owns it. And that's something I'd experiment with. But I'll tell you this, I'm not going to make agreements with somebody I don't know who's anonymous to suddenly have magic control over any part of this land. That would be a disservice to anyone else who's going to be here. Because that would attract some very bad people. Trust me. I know. I'm experienced. One guy did comment as I'm trying to socially design this space. He said, well, you want to be the government there. And it's like, well, not really, actually. I want to die and not have to deal with this shit. And I'm not a big fan of governments in general. And I don't feel like doing anything, which is why for years I haven't done anything, because it's a pain in the ass to deal with people. So I think that's incorrect. I do not want to be the government. The government in particular is something that claims to own a piece of land and own people, and those people have to be subjected to the rules of that government or they have to escape that location. Well, escaping the location is an option, but then you're still under a government involuntarily. Now, the idea with a intentional community is that you choose what you want to have with other people ahead of time, not just choosing the people getting together and then having it be a shit show of conflict, but having very defined visions for each space. And that definition becomes something that reduces the need for government-like authority. It reduces the need for leadership because you're being led by a social agreement, a document that spells out in immense detail. And you also have rules on how to change that. Since needs change, shit occurs. I mean, you can change the Constitution of the United States if you follow some rules. You should not just ignore it like the current people calling themselves the government of the United States do. They just don't follow the law. But, they know they're not going to be able to push through the evil constitutional changes that they would want. And unfortunately, there's probably a few some people want. But I'm happy that it's really hard to push their agenda through. I really like the Constitution of the United States. It's pretty damn good. One of the best documents ever written. And so likewise, I would expect that the charter of each community would be as detailed as possible, and what would be most notable, blah, 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 blah. I talk too fast. Yeah, keep up, whatever. I don't give a shit. Why can't I have like a relaxing walk in the forest? I guess I'm more relaxed when the camera's off. It's your fault, see? You're bugging the shit out of me. Don't take that personally. You're just a camera. I don't know you. So most notably would be the differences between those contracts where a group of people got together and they said, this section here in section 7, article B, this sentence here, we don't like that one for this reason. And then all the other groups could also consider that. And we could see if they want to change it, if they want to have a different one. And that would be part of the experiment. We're all kind of starting out with a shared template of a community, but then we deviate from there. Some things could be different. For example, in a kid town community that's pretty kid focused, and there's a big kid town there, it might be fine if those kids yell. And they would not be located next to a community where people want to live a monk-like quiet life, where everything being quiet was held to a much greater standard of value. It was more valued. Fuck. I should have eaten some today. I ate 2 sandwiches yesterday. That was good. So, other stuff on land zoning, a lot of the types of land, the spaces, will kind of determine their use. And that right there is super brilliant, because that's not how towns get developed. No spaces get developed like that. Sometimes buildings get developed like that, but usually towns evolve. And evolution is cool, neat, for the very long term, but we're very smart about how we use land. And so if we pick land to be used for its highest value, and we think about all the water flow, rain capture, and architecture, and we actually design it, and design it to fit in with the other spaces as well. I've never heard of anyone doing that. And the reason it would be the greatest intentional community in the world would be because of its diversity. Another one I know about that's pretty cool, it's probably the biggest in the world, is Oroville in India. And I don't know a lot about it. I've never been there, but I've read stuff. And first off, it's not a money-free society. Just go read some shit. There is no money-free place. And people just love to make that stuff up because they want to live for free off of other people. But there is money used there. Yeah, they do have a card system and a debit thing and all that. And that's probably, might be even an idea to borrow. In fact, I would love to study the hell out of that place and steal any ideas that I can. For example, they have a place that has a big, huge solar oven. Maybe one of the biggest in the world, I don't know. And it channels all this heat in through big mirrored funnel thing into a bunch of ovens, that you can just use like ovens. So it has a form factor for use that is understandable to people. And that cranks out either a bunch of food for people or a bunch of bread. Maybe it's just a bread bakery, I don't know. But certainly a system like that, you can make all kinds of food, so maybe they do. But that's the kind of thing I want to build here. And there are certain systems that every single individual community would have, and others that could be shared between them, depending on what makes sense. Not everybody has to have a copy of every single thing. 2 rabbit farms would be fine. We could have 2 rabbit farms. We could have multiple chicken farms protected from avian flu. Maybe some emu farms. We could have, some places have donkeys and horses and other places wouldn't. Donkeys, by the way, also make a bunch of noise when they bray. They go, ee-aw! That's not what they actually sound like. I'm not good at making a donkey noise. But they're good at it, and they're loud as fuck. I don't know why they do it either. Like, what are they saying? But I want it to happen. But choices have to be made about where things happen at. And so there's a big design thing there. But drawing up this shit is going to be really hard because there are real risks to working with anyone. And I guess my number one thought for anyone thinking they want to be involved with me is first, consider going off and doing your own shit. Because if the first thing you think is, I'm going to go to that guy's land, do what the fuck I want, no, we're probably not compatible, don't come. We're going to come up with documents that spell out a bunch of kinds of interactions. I don't even want noisy gasoline cars driving around. Yeah, that's a fucking rule. It's really rude of me to make it. But the outer parts of the community will have spots for arrival with noisy, electric, smelly cars, which ideally people would share more than not. There are communities that have shared vehicles. And then internal in the communities, it would be carts, horses, burros, carts drawn by horses or burros, perhaps electric vehicles. I still fantasize about electric 4x4s. I think that'd be really cool, and those could pull carts as well. So there are many options. I'm not super narrow-minded, but I want to make very conscious decisions about what technology exists where, and conscious decisions about every single building that exists. I see notes all the time from people who live around here on social media, and they say how cold they are at night, or that their house gets too hot in part of the summer. And it's like, well, it's because the building isn't designed right. My buildings are not currently designed right. I don't have a single correctly designed building. Some of them can be retrofitted, but I know how to design them better now. And that should be questioned. But, the buildings I put in a bunch when I first got here. I paid someone to do it, and those are all kind of not great and don't take into account anything. That's before I had built composting toilets. So they actually had water-based toilets in them. which was just dumb, and they're all removed now. They're planters now. But future buildings will be built so people are comfortable all the time, all year long. And slightly too hot, I think. And parts of the building might be colder for sleeping, like some people might want to sleep at 60 degrees, and every single bedroom would have a temperature graph of its natural nature during the year, what it has for temperature, and people could choose to live in a hotter or less hot bedroom based on its placement. That's cool. That's great. We want diverse options. There is no perfect temperature to be at. But I'll tell you this, I want people to be able to walk around like they're at the beach. Not muggy, not cold, but be able to walk around and not be bundled up pretty much ever. At night, outside, in an unprotected location, of course it's going to be colder. But we can even make tunnels between communities, to attach one community to another community. And that tunnel might attach to another community, meaning that there might be, kind of like Disneyland has, right? There's this underground city under it for staff. And that could allow for a whole bunch of things to occur, like movement of goods, movement of residents among places, and storage and root cellars and all sorts of stuff. So, and that's something that is really hard to retrofit. I'm very much against retrofitting. So that's one of the reasons that so much work has to go into upfront design that's really good. This applies to software as well. Probably movie making. There's probably movies that get made that people are in the middle of making it and they realize it totally sucks and they thought they were making a good movie, and it's too late. They have to finish the movie and take what they can out of it, but they fucked up because they didn't front load their design, their better writing, perhaps better casting, perhaps their general vision. I think that's one of the reasons I like shitty movies, like schlock movies and bad horror and exploitation movies and Hays Code movies. Those I like because they break censorship rules, and I don't think there should be a lot of censorship rules on movies. You can look up Hayes, Hays Code, and I specifically have looked online for those movies, and some of them are going out of copyright, and some of them could be recreated. The fact that in the USA you could even have such a thing as a Hays Code is ridiculous. That's against the Second Amendment. It's enforcing cultural law upon people and should not be permitted. In the same way, in a community, I want to get down to details on what's allowed and isn't allowed to make it so that people can voluntarily join into a contract knowing what it is. And really having fluidity between those communities would be amazingly awesome, because that would allow people who weren't perfectly happy in the community the way it was, or it was going in a direction they didn't like, although hopefully that direction's already determined. It's mostly pre-planned. But they could then move into another community. Or what if you grow up in one community and the kids there, like your brothers and sisters, this happens on kibbutzes, right? And so you don't feel like it would feel incestuous to have a relationship with that kid when you get older. And so you seek someone from another community, or potentially somebody who's new to the community. But that way you don't have to feel frustrated, you don't have enough options. And of course that's determined by how many people are in the community. But I also imagine that if this model works, if my delusions function, that you could buy land over there and use that same model to create another group of communities in the same place. And even then you could have things like, I imagine, sharing a bulldozer. Even here you wouldn't need a bulldozer all the time. But if you were building new communities all the time, and you became really an area, because the size of Oroville is really big, and within it they have whole systems of different hostels and restaurants, and it's like a bunch of neighborhoods, I think. I don't know, it's a little hard to tell, and I'm really annoyed that they don't publish their solar oven plans online, because I want to steal their solar oven plans. I also want the sauna plans for the Ritz sauna at the Oregon Country Fair. I don't think those are online, but that's one of the kind of philosophies I want to have be very much part of what we do mostly here, is create things and then share the design whenever possible. I mean, certainly if it was crowdfunded, then the public owns the design. All this innovation, we could just be spewing out innovation all over the world. That'd be so cool. The more we give away, the richer we are. But we shouldn't do things the way I've done them, because I got real poor doing what I was doing. And that's going to have a lot to do with selection of individuals to join such a system, and whether it will then be a success or not. We have to attract people who have resources and then create something that they find so valuable that they love it. And, you know, even if there was a group here that was here for a while, they might decide after the agreement was up, they might decide to buy their own land elsewhere because they don't want to be under the overarching organization. That's totally fine. Or they don't want to go official with it. That's great. You know, I don't think we should lock people in too quickly, and I think we should be very slow about adding people into the community system, you know, where they're a long-time visitor, before we even bother talking about whether a longer-term relationship, like maybe till the rest of their life, whether that even makes any sense. And that's a rational, smart way to think, instead of the idealistic, delusional way that most people think when they're setting up an intentional community. Goodbye, good luck. I'm out of breath. Fuck.